Shadiversity.
Greetings, I'm Shad, and many of my viewers and subscribers are aspiring writers and have come to, strangely, appreciate my opinion, which I am very grateful and rather flattered by. And seeing as though I'm a passionate writer myself, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about my supposed credentials, go watch my video, How to Write a Novel. And with that background, it is my pleasure to offer a helping hand now and then to those of my viewers who are trying to learn this elusive art and craft. Is it art or craft? So, like I've done previously, I've invited them to send samples of their writings to me, where I will review and mercilessly rip them apart. I've warned them that I'll do this, so heads up, but also everyone, let's show a bit of respect for the fact that they've shown such bravery in opening up, the work of their own hands to such public scrutiny. Some of you might be wondering, how on earth did these, people send me their writing samples? And the answer is that I announced it on the community tab on through the Shadiversity YouTube channel. Notifications of community posts doesn't get sent to all subscribers. Heck, even videos posts don't get sent to all subscribers, because subscribing doesn't really mean much, unfortunately, on the YouTube state of things as they are. To make sure you get notifications like that, you need to click the bell icon. So if you want to catch the next announcement, or I'm able to do something like this, click the bell icon and make sure to come back to my channel regularly. Don't bother sending in any more samples if you go to the community post, because I set up a new a Gmail account to receive all your submissions, because there was a lot of them. And that was only in 1 day's time I got all these. And I won't be looking at any other samples after this video goes live, so you just have to wait until the next time I do it. And before we get started into it, I want everyone to just remember how much of a subjective nature reviewing people's writings can be, okay? So everything that I say, honestly, a lot of it can be my own opinion, but there are other certain more standardized literary rules that I've come to learn along the way, and that if I see certain mistakes along those lines, I'll be able to point them out. But in regards to things, if I say, this doesn't grab me, I don't find it too interesting and stuff like that, that's all subjective opinion. Someone else might find it very interesting, and this is the kind of tricky thing about, trying to become a successful author and stuff like that, is this subjective nature, and who is really qualified to be able to tell quality except other else. Like a great but also somewhat troubling example in this is the difficulty that J.K. Rowling found in trying to get Harry Potter published. One of the most successful literary properties of the modern day was rejected so often by so many literary agents who were supposed to have known what was good. And so that just throws this thing into a little bit more of a contextual understanding about the subjective nature. So if I say something doesn't work, it very well might. I mean, people who claim authority have proven many a times through history in the past how much they can fail at what they are supposed to be qualified at doing. And I'm kind of undermining my own credibility here, but take from this what you will. If you find it constructive and helpful, that's wonderful, and making this video was worth it. Okay, so this writing sample is by Rhys Avis, and it is entitled Of Foxes and Fires. Their battle was over, but hers was not. This is a little bit tricky for me to make a call on just yet, because there's a couple of references to things that I have no knowledge about, which makes this sentence a little hard to grab you. For instance, their battle. Whose battle? Okay, who are we actually talking about? Now, we don't know who her is, this woman that the sentence is referring to, but this is much easier to try and establish who this is, because the assumption is this must be the main character, and this is the focal thing, because their battle was, but hers was not. This is what we're zoning in on. So we'll find out in the next couple of sentences if we get to figure out who they are at the beginning, and if it's not really mentioned or explained, this might just simply be better to be written as her battle wasn't finished. Now, even though that improves it a bit in my own, subjective opinion, I'm not necessarily sure that makes a good opening sentence. But let's continue and see if this section is contextualized a bit more. The rain drummed on the tin roof as loud as gunfire, the howls of the injured seeped through the walls. I did something very automatic then, because this is the nature of passive voice versus active voice and stuff like that. An active voice simply means making things sound more immediate, though it's more specifically, the ball was thrown by Eric to his friend. That's a passive sentence, and there's a way you can make it much more active. Eric threw the ball to his friend. Now, I actually think this sentence is kind of on that level of immediate, active, voice, but you can actually use present tense versions of words in past tense, because even in past tense, in the given scene, there is a past, present, and future to that specific scene. And so the rain drummed on the tin roof. So that's kind of past to the scene, as loud as gunfire, explaining how loud the rain was, perfectly fine, and how's the injured seeped through the walls. This is stated in the same kind of past tense as the previous section of the sentence, and you could have written it to make it just that little bit more active and immediate, as the rain drummed on the roof, as loud as gunfire, how's the injured seeping through the walls. And so by structuring a sentence this way, you have a past to the given scene, even though this is all in past tense, and then you have kind of a present of that scene, which is the how's the injured. And by doing that, we are able to get rid of the and. So we've already thrown away a single word, but that's even a single word, okay, making a sentence more efficient, okay, and smaller. If you can convey the same information with less words, always do that, all right? If there's a way to do it, take it. And then seeping through the walls, because that is a much more immediate and active word. Moving on. She blocked it all out. The pulse was all that mattered. So this sentence has a bit of a problem with it, because when it says she blocked it all out, and then the very next section, the pulse was all that mattered, technically when she says she blocked it all out, that is saying she blocked out the pulse as well, because she's blocking everything out, but clearly you're trying to say she blocked out the previous noises, such as the rain drumming on the roof and the screams or the howls of the injured. So the way to fix this little bit of confusion is to say in as fewer words as possible that the viewpoint character is blocking out that specific thing, not everything. The other odd thing is that you're not saying the character's name. This very much looks to be written in third person limited, which is a third-person perspective from a viewpoint character. It's not first person, so the character isn't seeing, I saw this and I saw that and everything was around me. It's so-and-so saw this, so-and-so and saw that. And all the information that this viewpoint character has should be understood by the narrator. And so the question is, why is the narrator referring to her as she when the narrator would know who her name is? Now, I'm not saying you can't, break this rule in a third-person limited narrative. Rules are there to be broken. For me, it's striking me as a little bit odd, but that, again, could be a subjective thing. So if we say her name was Sarah, it would be something like, Sarah struggled to block out the noise. The man's pulse was all that she focused on, or something like that. But if that was the sentence we went with, who's the man, okay? In what situation or position is he to the person? So the man's pulse, of whom's life she was trying to save, was all that she focused on, something like that. That's better, it's more active, and then things are explained in a way that structures the scene more coherently, okay? You need to transfer, it's funny, you actually need to transfer a lot of information, especially in an establishing scene like this, and then you need to try and do it as efficiently as possible with as least amount of words as possible, which is efficiency. I'm just repeating myself in a different way of words. Don't worry, I'll do that. See, this is what I struggle with. I have to struggle with the way my natural way of speaking structures information and stuff like that into a much more efficient way. My written word is a much higher diction of language, if I'm even using that terminology correctly, than my natural way of speaking, which is all random. Okay, next sentence. It was weak, but the man's desire to live kept it beating. Now we know what the it is referring to because it's the pulse, as mentioned in the previous sentence, so that's fine. But the man's desire to live kept it beating. Okay, this could be redundant information, okay? It was weak, but the man's desire to live kept it beating. Of course it would, people desire to live. Something that would give us a little bit more information about the person, but essentially say or establish the same thing, but then add more, would be to write the sentence such as, it was weak as the man struggled to hold on to life. But that sounds wordy. It was weak, comma, the man fighting off death as best he could. Or, it was weak, comma, the man struggling to fight off death so fervently that he gasped and suddenly the pulse became stronger for only an instant. And in terms of that last possible restructuring of this sentence, we suddenly bring things into being a little bit more concrete because we're then describing something physical about the person she's working on. He gasps and it just visualizes the scene that little bit better. It ends up being a longer sentence, but if it's doing so much more, it can work a lot better. As her mind expanded to the man's entire being, she became him on the table. Ooh, wow, okay, that's a big shift in kind of tone, because this seems like it's implying magic. She has some type of telepathic power almost. If that's not what you're wanting to imply, you've tried to over-explain her focus. Because when I read that, her mind expanded to the man's, man apostrophe S, entire being, she became him on the table. It feels like her consciousness is leaving her mind and entering the body. And if that is some type of supernatural thing in the book, gee, that's an interesting kind of hook, and establishing something like that could work a bit better earlier on within this paragraph, though it doesn't need to be the thing you lead with, but it does... who knows, it could be fine where it is. And because I don't know exactly what you're trying to say specifically in regards to her powers and what's happening, it's hard for me to try and make this sentence more efficient or easier to understand because I don't really know what's being said. Good stuff, all right? Don't feel disheartened. This I've seen much, much worse, okay? And it's not to say that... I don't know how much revision this has gone through either, but I've certainly written worse in the past as well. So there's my feedback. Thank you for sending it in. Let's move on to the next one. This next one is a submission from Guy Reynolds. Appreciate it, Guy. I appreciate it. You're a cool guy. Sorry, I gotta go there. And it's The Eagle's Gold, Chapter 1. And it opens with, "There will be fire." Then it goes to a new line and it says, "That's what the Solaresi? Fantasy words. Say, okay, the only tenant in their religious book, that there will be fire." All right, so you've repetition, okay? You've already established that there will be fire. And the other thing is, with the opening line, there's not enough to grab it. I think condense this into a paragraph altogether. The fact that it's separating onto different paragraphs isn't really working. And a more efficient way of condensing this and avoiding repetition would be something like, "The only tenant of Celeresi," I'm going to say Celeresi. "The only tenant of the Celeresi's religious book states there will be fire." You see, people, especially agents, and especially if agents are going scorched earth, even they are encouraged. There's a knee-jerk thing to finish a sentence, okay? And then they're going to analyze that sentence, and especially readers as well. But I think a reader will generally show a bit more tolerance to, things than agents will. By just having "there will be fire" with no explanation, a preface, beginning or end in a single sentence, you're kind of losing an opportunity. But by bringing all this information into one sentence, it strikes me as more snappy, efficient, and it grabs my attention better. "The only tenant of the Celeresi's religious book states there will be fire." And that's interesting, like, oh, fire, okay, what? So something like that would work better. Okay, so something that is confusing me here is in the sentence, "It's short, simple, if not sweet, as I watched my lover die for the 100th time. It fit, there was fire." That sentence seems to imply that he is physically watching, and so something supernatural is happening, forcing him to watch his lover die over and over again. But in the next paragraph, you're more establishing that he is reliving the memory. "In the dark, mist-filled halls of my mind, the scene played itself over one more time." So just to make the previous sentence fit in a less confusing way with the following paragraph, "As I watched my lover die for the 100th time in my mind." In fact, you might even be able to combine those two sentences, which would make it more efficient overall. "It was short, simple, if not sweet. As I watched in the dark, mist-filled halls of my mind, my lover die for the 100th time. It fit. There was fire." That works better, in my own opinion. So I think the thing that was throwing me in that structure was that you're establishing him physically watching something, or it seems to be, and then he's reliving it in his mind, kind of separate to it, and it's also a repetition of what he's doing, so you don't even need to, if you combine it and change the watched into and you wrote it well, "in the dark, mist-filled halls of my mind," put that in place of watched, as I just described, combine it, it works a lot better, and this is a good example of making your writing more efficient. But there's a lot of cool, interesting things going on here, and you have a good descriptive narrative style that I feel works quite well. It's just a matter of fitting them together more snugly and getting rid of redundancy and, yeah, like the repetition that there will be fire, something, there will be fire, something, there will be fire. Put it all together. All right, good stuff. Thank you again. We'll move on to the next one. This sample is from Maewyn Irendhel. Okay, and it is the Shieldmaiden. All right, well, I like the title, Shieldmaidens, but, you know, I'm biased. Swords, shields, cool. Okay, so chapter 1, The Last Switch. Maewyn's father, King Gaelon, Lord of the island, info dump, place name, person name, bad, get rid of it, kill it, burn it with fire. So look, I'm sorry. Hey, look, I'm as harsh on my own stuff, okay? And we all pass through these stages, so, you know, I don't mean to be harsh, but I am being harsh. But there is a bit of a nugget of something interesting here. And it's that the king is on his deathbed, okay? And so all this information that you're addressing, this hook, okay, is irrelevant right now in the story, especially the beginning, okay? We do not need to know the island kingdom of Myrdos yet, all right? The king had been ill for nearly a month, you say. But when you say in the next paragraph that he lay on his deathbed, that's explicitly implied when you say he's laid on his deathbed, so you don't need to state he's been ill for a month. Get rid of that. Cough, we don't need, like, unless it's crucial to know what he died of, if it's going to be, you know, important to the plot later on, you don't mention it here. And even if it is important, you don't want to mention it in the beginning of the book. The hook, the interesting thing here is that the king is on his deathbed. Okay, and that can kind of work, but still is not the best opening or beginning. But you could get rid of this first paragraph completely and say, the king lay on his deathbed. But the next sentence is going to be very important to make that relevant to the reader in some way. Times asleep with his dreams, appreciate the final word. Okay, so this information in terms of how sick the king is can work well, but not for the first bits of information. You need to lead in with some type of good hook, and then you can go in to start to establish the scene, like how each cough tore at already bruised muscles and cracked ribs and so on. Cracked ribs? That sounds like he actually was beaten up, cracked ribs. I think there are some situations where you can crack a rib through coughing so, you know, violently. But anyway, moving on. Bring my children to me. Closed his eyes and spoke no more. See, I can't even find a proper good follow-up to the king laying on his deathbed. So the only information that you could keep in from what I've read so far is setting the scene kind of stuff. Bad coughing, the king turns to his good lady, bring his children to him, his eyes closed. He closed his eyes and spoke no more. So he's dying, you're implying he's dying there? So actually no, the king isn't dead yet, it just seems to be, you know, unconscious, but he's very close to dying. Yeah, it is hard for me to say what you should do to fix this, because starting a book with a king dying and a heartbroken daughter who we don't really know or have any investment in, yeah, it's a bit depressing. Like maybe if you were to establish something in the beginning hook of the greater implication of what this will mean to her and her kingdom. You know, is she going to have to marry someone she hates, or could this mean war? So yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't open well because it's all info dump and stuff like that with a lack of a hook. But you could kind of just start with the king lay on his deathbed, but you need to find a way to make that relevant, significant, important, interesting to the reader. Because if it's just the king lay on his deathbed with no further, you know, statement or implication, and then just moving on to the bereaved daughter, I don't see anyone being interested in reading it. It's hard to say, but trust me, I have been in a position where I've written, you know, stuff that just didn't work either, okay? So go back, revise, and rewrite. It's just the process that all writers need to do. I hope this isn't too discouraging. It can be hard, but if you really want to get better as a writer, you just got to kind of take it on the chin and move forward. So we might only have time for one more, and so what I just have to go kind of like, that one. So this is from Ace Ellender, and it is Echoes of the Alpha, an enemy which is not utterly vanquished. Okay. Kind of irrelevant information, yet could be relevant if you were to just rephrase it as an old enemy will rise again and destroy all that you built. Because if an old enemy will rise, it's implied, and you don't need to state it, that he wasn't utterly vanquished. An old enemy also implies that he has been in the world before, something has happened with this enemy, and so instead of just saying an enemy, you say an old enemy, which replaces the need to say utterly vanquished, and destroy all that you built. Now this is the other kind of thing. All that you, like that you is directed to the reader. What's that, second person narrative? No, but in the context, if you could do it in quotation marks, then this is a character speaking, and therefore he must be speaking to someone or the people in the world, and so you could put it in quotations. An old enemy will rise again and destroy all that you built still there. And you just end it there. An old enemy will rise again and destroy all. Of course, the problem with it, even if you try and, polish this sentence up a bit more, is that it is horribly generic, okay? An old enemy will rise again, said Lord Voldemort. Sauron, one ring to rule them all thing. Of course, look, rules are meant to be broken, and some people love the classics, okay? And the fact that things become generic is because people have liked it in the past. And if you want to have, an old enemy, a great lord, dark power, or lord ruler figure going to be the main antagonist in the story, you can do that. I mean, it's tried and true. The problem is trying to make your story stand out amongst the hundreds of other ones that have gone before. Now, the interesting thing is, just having quickly scanned the beginning of the chapter, it's so separate, but there's some interesting stuff that could, even if you don't lead with a strong hook, if something is happening that's interesting enough, that can be a kind of hook that just grabs the reader's attention and they keep reading. And to the point that this opening line, get rid of it completely. It seems to be a distraction. It's separate, like if you're going to have a dark evil or something like that come in later. But I mean, it's not part of the chapter. If this was just, I don't know, underneath a heading or something, but again, it's generic, that could chase people away. So you might be safer just to get rid of it. But then we have this interesting kind of thing. Formatting is wrong, of course. You need the indent at the beginning of the chapter and stuff like that. Freshly dug soil, still silent. A squirrel runs over. Present tense. I mean, general convention is to do past tense. People can find it jarring. Generally, I've explained this before in other videos, so I won't go over everything. My own preference is avoid present tense, because whenever you relate a story, you generally naturally speak in past tense, and so oftentimes when I've seen people try to write in past tense, and I'm kind of speaking from experience because when I started trying to write, I started writing in present tense, and so when people try and write in present tense, I've noticed from personal experience, you accidentally slip into past tense usage and you break the tense structure of your thing, and so to avoid that, just say for just past tense, okay. But you have a squirrel runs over, looking inquisitively at the mound. The soil begins to move, almost pulsates. Worms? A mole, perhaps? So this is in omniscient, okay, because it's an omniscient narrator speaking on behalf of a squirrel. Now, it's not standard, but that's not to say people, don't do omniscient. Patrick Rothfuss's Name of the Wind is only partially, very slightly omniscient. Omniscient can work if there's a reason to do it, and if you're describing the thoughts of animals, yeah, omniscient's probably the best way to do it, though sometimes you could write in third person limited instead of third person omniscient. Well, this is third person present tense omniscient. You could probably do limited from a squirrel's perspective. It'll be interesting, and it might even be rather fun because the narrator can then start to take on characteristics and interests of the squirrel. Anyway, suddenly an eruption of debris flies through the air. An eruption causes debris, okay? But this is written in a sense that a debris is causing an eruption because there's an eruption of debris. So just to reword this where it would make sense, it would be suddenly an eruption, comma, debris flies through the air and a hulking wolf is revealed. This is very expository, okay? That's one of the dangers of omniscient. Scared, bloodied, his chest heaves, taking in ragged breaths. Fresh blood drips from his brow, and damp dirt and coagulated plasma stick to his fur. His paws clench and his lips curl into a snarl. Only one thing is evident in this beast's mind. Revenge. Yeah, there's a lot to try and unpack with this. A wolf was underground and he burst forth out of the ground, throwing debris everywhere. Usually wolves can't do that. It's magic, fantasy, that just is confusing. Question marks are already flying in the air. Now, the advantage of writing omniscient, you can state that the wolf is scared. You don't need to do scared, single sentence. You could scared, comma, bloodied, then full stop. His chest heaves, then that would be comma, taking in ragged breaths, not a separate sentence. Fresh blood drips from his brow, and damp dirt and coagulated plasma stick to his fur. That's a fine enough descriptive sentence, okay? His paws clench, and his lips curl into a snarl. Only one thing is evidence in this beast's mind. Revenge. Thing is, it's not evident, okay? It wouldn't, like, to who in existence would it be evident that you could read a wolf's mind and know he's thinking of revenge? It's evident to the narrator because he has an omniscient perspective on the entire world. But the narrator is there to describe things to the reader, not himself, so it would be only one thing is in this beast's mind, revenge, but still, it's a bit clunky. In fact, I think it's more snappy and powerful, especially with the kind of nature you're structuring your sentences, if it was just written like, he hungers for revenge. Hobbling deeper along the woodland paths, water begun... See, this is the problem with writing in present tense. You've just written something in past tense. Water begun to fall from the heavens. If you're writing in present tense, water begins to fall from the heavens. And so, better to avoid mistakes like that, which it'll just make it, you're right, you're safer. It'll make it safer from avoiding. So a better strategy, which will help you avoid mistakes like that, is just write it in past tense, okay? This will avoid accidental slips into past tense when you're trying to write in present. He nursed his wounds as best a wounded canine could, glaring into the distance, the names of the traitors repeated constantly in his head. Now this is interesting. You're describing things that the wolf is thinking. And when you say the names of the traitors repeated constantly, wolves don't really think of, language in terms of words. It just doesn't seem natural to me. You could have the traitors or the image of the face of the traitors repeated constantly in his head, but still repeated constantly in his head. It sounds clunky to me. The image of the traitors consuming his every thought. That sounds better. So I'll leave that there. There is a bit to work on, though the interesting situation is that you're following something that's happened to a wolf, and that's different, okay? And sometimes if something is different, that can be an interesting hook enough to grab someone's attention. But there is still a lot to work out and fix up. Appreciate it. Thank you for sending it in. And that's where we will have to leave things at the moment. I really do appreciate you guys sending it in. Thank you for presenting your work for my criticism. I'm sorry if you might be discouraged or if it was too harsh. I'm just being honest, and I warned you, all right? If you're gonna go send something in, I have to call it as I see it, but find consolation in the fact that we've all gone through it. I have written stuff far worse, so go back, revise, and rewrite. I hope it's been thought-provoking and you've learned a couple of things, and of course I hope to see you again. Until then, farewell.